NRL Super Coaches, I hope you went back and checked out the hooker, front row forward and second row forward video. This one here, we're talking the players of interest from halfback, 5'8", centre wing, and the all-important fullback position. We're going from price high to low, and we kick it off in our halfback position with Nathan Cleary at 811k. So it's a very interesting situation, how you have to look at this position. We've got Cleary, who may be touch and go to be there for round one. They don't have a bye early for once. That's pretty interesting for someone like him. And is he going to be there? That's the question. And then you've got Hughes, who had an absolutely terrific season, and he's never gone back-to-back incredible seasons. So I think it's hard for you to purchase him from round one. Nico Hines at 735 is so much cheaper than last year. And he's someone that I think will be a contentious topic because he's lost a little bit of the zhuzh, the importance in that team because Trindle has taken over a little bit, and that's where the cheapness comes from. He didn't have a perfect year last year, but he has definitely lots of potential to get back to where he was, and he keeps the goal kicking. He doesn't need kicking in general play like he does in fantasy, and he can still be a great pick. We've got DCE, who's a little bit less as well. So there's a few guys of interest there in that top tier, and then it gets to Mitch Moses, who is a lot cheaper than normal. We've got Jerome Luai, who's now has the team on his back at the Tigers with the dual position as well, under 600k. And you've got Jamal Fogarty, who had a really cracking start last year, has the goal kicking, and is at 535, which is pretty reasonable. So there's lots of options in that top 7 that you could go with. And, DCE, as I said there, is a little bit cheaper, but, he's got Luke Brooks there. Does he have a better year on the assists and the try front there? That's for sure. Lots of different strategies you can go for with the potential of issues of lying around Cleary and Hines. Is it mid-range central in the halfback position? Is that where you go? Do you spend some cash elsewhere by saving that little bit up top compared to what we had last year with spending a heap up top on Cleary and Hines? It could also backfire that plan for sure because there's also plenty of cheap guys to pair these mid-range or the top guns with. So a few options there. It's Top Gun and cheapy, as always, given it looks like there's a bunch of cheapy options available with Sandon Smith, with potentially a Jamie Humphries or a Lewis Dodd. We have Lockie Ilias, we have Isaiah Katoa at 390, which is pretty crazy, and then Tanner Boyd as well with the dual position if he gets to start at the Warriors, which I think he probably is number 14, but we'll see how that one plays out. You've got the lower gun with the cheapy, you've got the two lower guns in that sort of 500 to 600 range, and then you have a lower gun and the 300 to 400 type player that we've got between 10 and 14 there. So it's pretty interesting how the halfback situation is laying out. I think it's pretty solid position given there are some cheaper guys available in that 300 to 400 range for sure, and also not as high of a price for Cleary and Hines like it was in 2024. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting situation for the halfbacks. Which way are you likely to go? Moving on to the 5'8", there's obviously here 9 available on this list that I've got, and I have all of them as a potential player of interest for me in bold there. A few more guys across these next bunch of positions in half, 5'8", centre wing, and fullback are of interest for me, and I think that means there's just a bit of value around, and guys that have upside is how we're looking at it in these positions, whether it's in the the higher price range, the guys that are a little bit cheaper than may have thought, or I think that they can have a bit of a breakout or an improved season to get to top tier gun status. In the 5'8" position, you've got a few like that in my opinion. In Burton at 648, the goal kicking in a team that's ever improving. You've got Dearden. Is at a pretty high price compared to normal, but he is also, I think, the main gun in that side with Scott Drinkwater now, and he has to do a lot, and he could get himself to that top tier if the Cowboys can play well. That's probably the question. Luai could move into that status now with his own team, and then Munster as a returning gun as well. So to go along with Dylan Brown at 651, who was more expensive last year to start the season, and the Eels look like they should improve after a pretty dire season, and he has dual position along with Jerome Luai. And then you do have a few guys in the mid-range in Metcalf and Flanagan who could do a good job. Tanner Boyd and Will Price in that cheaper slot. So with your 5'8" strategies, at this point it's probably hard to find a cheapie under 300k unless something happens injury-wise, but it's very, very likely to go gun and mid-range or a gun and a cheapie at this point. I think to keep a position with only 2 players, you want to, similar to what we spoke about in the other video with the hooking position or the front row position, to be able to lock that position in and not make too many trades in it can be very, very helpful and important to your side. So I think that's a good little strategy to go for, the gun and mid-range. You don't have to worry about trading in it, but that does mean you're spending some cash in the position, whereas you might want to spend a little bit elsewhere. And then the gun and the cheapie option if that comes up, but it's only really the 2 cheapies right now in Tanner and Will Price there could be options there. So that's the question you need to ask yourself is, do you spend the cash in this position or do you go elsewhere? There's lots of other positions, and once you're playing around and mucking around with your team, you'll see where you might want to spend a little bit of that cash, or maybe with a position there you could save that little bit more. For center wing players, there is a lot. There's 32 guys on this list right now, and that bodes a lot of center wing strategies, that's for sure. And you see in bold in the back 7 players there, sorry, I've got 5 in bold, and I think that a bunch of those guys can get an opportunity. And how wild is the Stafford Toll one after previous seasons, but he didn't play much last year with lots of injuries, and he could come back. But we have some of the youngsters in Rob Toa, in Jesse McLean and Jackson Purdue, who all have an opportunity to get a spot in their side. With Johnston out early, we might see Fletcher Myers on that wing. We'll see how that one plays out. You have guys like Isaiah Tass, Jackson Borlow there, Carter Gordon, Jesse Arthurs, after a good start last year, fell back into his old ways. And if the Broncos can play better, he could be a fun one as well. So there's a lot of cheapies in there, and that could spell some options. Given we've got lots of top tier guns, center wing is arguably the most important position to get right to start with so much volatility that occurs, but there's so much upside here, and that's the way you want to look at it. There's, I think, a mixture of it, one top gun, a few mid-tier guys, that sort of 500 or so range, some cheapies with some upside in solid teams is the correct play. How do you spark that balance is going to be the question. It's been the right play for years. So, first option there is a top gun, a lower gun, one sort of 450 to 500k guy, one 350 and 3 cheapies that have some upside. You might play one of them. You might just bench the others. Who knows? They could be in your top 17 or 18. Number 2, you've got 3 sort of guys between 450 and 600, a couple of 350 guys, and a couple of cheapies. So that would be spending a little bit less, but you've got 3 guys that are in that solid position that maybe have a bit of upside that you see. And then the third one, there's so much to do in this position and so much time to cover over the next few months that I think we can see what pops up, because this strategy will change heaps depending on what is available. In terms of top guns, you've got Holmes and Lomax both changing teams, which is interesting. And then you've got Farnworth at 728 along with Kiraz. Dane Gagai, does he get back into Origin? Does he have a really nice solid run with that night side? So you can pick one of those guys for sure. You've got Jermaine Asako, who it does look like Farnworth might be on his side this year. He was very up and down at certain points, and if the Dolphins can play pretty well, we'll have to see how that one plays out. He could have a good season. You got Lucas there with the duel, like we mentioned. We've got Cobbo at 550. If the Broncos can play better, I think he has some value, but he could just plod around that price again and be awkward in the center position if he does play there. On the wing, I think a little bit better. Greg Marzou, coming off a pretty poor season for his standards, he has upside to start, I think, along with guys like Isaac Tungo. And then you got Campbell Graham coming back from his sternum injury, and I hope he plays, man. I really hope he gets an opportunity, because that 505 is a good little position there if he comes back good and looks good in the trials. Jarrell Skelton, if he gets an opportunity there with the Tigers, and if they're playing pretty well, I think he can score great. He averaged better than what he's priced at right now. Blake Wilson, if he gets his opportunity with the Dogs, will be fun. Casey McLean there after a really solid start to his career. Nwanga Nitawazi at 438k. If the Roosters can play pretty well, I think he can fulfill that. If not, it might be a little bit too expensive to start. But you've got Dewey there at 431, Jack Howarth at 426. Both really interesting as well. Zach Laybutt coming off his ACL injury. Munro coming off a lot of injuries last year, and Ben Trbojevic as well. So there's so many options in the center wing. I don't think you can miss too much on these guys. It'll just be when they fire. Some guys could be a consistent sort of 40 or 50, but is that what you want in the center wing position? I don't think so. You want it to be as high upside as you can. So that's where guys like Jack Bird could be really solid. We saw issues last year with Hutchison and Taylor May and these types of guys that weren't able to really crack it. Whereas guys like Bostock on the wing that got opportunities just to make line breaks and score tries, he would post the odd 100, and that was super helpful to gain cash, but get you closer to some top guns through those high upside games and that high upside 3 or 4 weeks of scores, but obviously the cash gains as well. So lots to think about in that center wing position. Think upside, and think upside. To finish things off, we got the fullbacks to target. There's 10 on my list. It's always an incredible position. This year, it's no different, with all the options being worth it, in my opinion, if you go that way. So they're all in bold this year. They're also someone that we need to look at. Even someone like Dylan Edwards, a very high price, but if Cleary isn't to be there in round 1, he'll have the goal kicking and be a tremendous option again. Tedesco is the highest price in the game, followed by Turbo and Latrell. Shows that this is the best performing position in the game. All those guys can do really well. You've got Ponga at 790, who I think provides a bit of value, with those guys being very expensive. And you have Drinkwater at 770, who's going to have to carry a lot of load for the Cows, with a few of their guys leaving, and is likely to take the goal kicking as well. So 770 for Drinkwater is very fun on that alone, that he's going to pick up a lot of extra points on that front, especially if they start pretty well. And then Walsh at 738 could definitely be a really solid one if you want to spend a little less in that fullback slot, and you don't have the cash to get to the top. Tedesco, Trbojevic, those kind of number guys there. And then Hammer at 653 is interesting. No Jewel this year. Pap at 616 is the cheapest of the top guns, and I think he will be in a lot of teams, albeit the round 2 buy does make it a little bit tough on that front. But if you can get through that, then I think saving some cash on Pap could be a really good idea. And then Isaiah Iongi at 232. He's the cheapie of the list, and that's where it gives you a potential to go one gun, one cheapie. You could have him in your flex. You can do muck around things like that. 3 fullbacks between flex and your fullback slot. You can go 2 guns straight up. You could spend 200k less and grab Pap on top of these other guys, and just save a little bit there and spend that elsewhere. They're all the different options that are presented in the fullback slot this year, in my opinion, at this point, early on in the preseason. Let me know your thoughts on those 4 positions. Who would you like to target? What strategy are you thinking in those slots there? And just let me know what you're planning to do. And thanks so much for watching at this point of the season. Super early. You guys are the best. You're all sickos like myself, if you're watching at this point. So, you guys are the best. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your Christmas period and your New Year's. You'll get this one just before New Year's there. So enjoy it, and I'll catch you in the next Supercoach video.